9. Eğitim Teknolojileri Zirvesi'ne hepiniz hoş geldiniz efendim. Bu yılda her yıl olduğu gibi birbirinden değerli konuşmacılarımızla karşınızdayız. Ben Neslihan Kaynar, İstanbul Üniversitesi Cerrahpaşa Yabancı Diller Yüksekokulu öğretim görevlisiyim. Ve zirve boyunca Hol 2 salonumuzda sizlerle beraber olacağım. Hepinize keyifli, bilgilendirici bir zirve geçirmenizi diliyoruz. Tekrardan hoş geldiniz. Welcome to the 9th Educational Technology Summit. We are honored to have you all and valuable speakers. I'm Neslihan Kaynar. I have been working as an instructor at Istanbul University Cerrahpaşa School of Foreign Languages. And we will be together in Hall 2. We hope you all have an enjoyable and informative day. Welcome back. So in our first session, Verissimo Toste from Bales English will be with us with his presentation titled Learning with Impact. Hello, Verissimo.
Okay, hello everyone.
Hello, welcome.
There we go.
We're honored to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. Great to talk to everybody. I would prefer to be in Turkey than rather doing this for Turkey, but this is the next best thing. So welcome everyone.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for accepting our invitation. So we are really pleased to meet you here today. Okay, even if we're in online.
Okay, even if it is online.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. You can start if you're ready.
Thank you.
Thank
you, and welcome everyone. In my case, from an England with some blue skies. I think that might be the Turkish influence. We usually don't have a lot of blue skies. And today, I'd like to talk about learning with impact. Let me tell you a little bit about me first and how I've come to really consider impact very important in teaching and learning today. So I am an international teacher trainer. I've worked around the world with different organizations, including the Portuguese Ministry of Education. So I've been a teacher and a teacher trainer for about 35 years. And the reason I mention that, one, for you to understand why it's me doing this today, but also to understand that in that journey of 35 years, I've talked about teaching, I've talked about learning, I've talked about learner independence, I've talked about assessment and various things related to English as a foreign language. And as I will mention today, impact has become very important lately. And when we talk about impact, and notice I'm talking here about learning with impact and not necessarily teaching with impact, okay? And that will be a difference here. So in the next about 45 minutes, I will be talking about the idea of learning and noticing, and teachers being able to notice that students are learning, okay? Now, you notice here that you have my email address there. So if you have any questions, any comments, any reason that you want to contact me about learning with impact, please feel free to do so. I really appreciate that. As teachers, we're part of a global community, and I like that conversation. So please feel free to send me an email, and I'll be happy to answer it and help with anything I can. The other thing I'd like to say is the image that I've used here is a little bit on purpose. And I guess what I'd like you to think about is how, as a teacher online, would we notice if a student is learning or not? Okay, is what we are doing in our lesson having an impact? Is it having an effect on the student? And we'll talk about this throughout the session, okay? Now, in learning with impact and the idea of what I've mentioned, assessment for learning, focusing on learning, one of the most important things is we call it inquiry-based learning, becoming inquisitive. In my classes, I usually narrow it down to inspire curiosity. Learning is about curiosity. So if today we are talking about learning with impact, ask yourself, what do you already know about learning with impact? Okay, what do you want to know about learning impact? So you're going to spend the next 40, 45 minutes here with me. Your students are going to spend 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour with you on learning English or learning anything. What is it that they already know? And what is it that they want to know? And what you want to inspire is that you want them to come to your classes, okay, with a certain curiosity. You want them to feel that they are part of that interaction, that experience that is learning. So I would encourage you here, as you're listening to me, to write 2 questions that you want to know today. Okay, and I might answer those questions in this presentation. I may not, and you have my email address to be able to contact me about that. But what this does in relation to impact in our classes with our students in almost any subject, and then, you know, beyond our classrooms, going on to the school, and then in that education process where parents are involved in that education. Because now that we're doing online learning, many of our students are not in the same environment they used to be before online learning. They are not in our classroom where we control that environment. They are at home. So again, what does that mean, curiosity? How should they come to our online classes, especially since online can provide more distractions? Okay, I'm looking out the window here, a car might pass by, somebody might knock on my door. I am open to distractions that I wasn't when I was in the brick and mortar classroom. So the first thing I'd like to say is inspire curiosity, both in yourselves when you come to, when you continue in the conference here and you go to different sessions, and in your students, and wider in the school. Okay, and as we move forward here, let's talk about what is impact. Okay, so what are we talking about and why is it important here? So according to Cambridge Assessment, the International Education, a paper they wrote on getting started with evaluating impact, which is more directed to teachers and what teachers can do to check their own impact. Impact is the effect that one action or event has on another action or event. And in general, that seems very easy, very simple, very straightforward. However, what does it mean? And in the context of my presentation today, what it means is that for me, what is it, okay, what do we do as teachers, okay, that will help our students learn better? Okay, what can we do? What works? So rather than focusing on how we teach, on our lesson plans, okay, on our activities and exercises and assessment, whatever it is, what works, okay, that makes my students learn better? And also equally important, how do I know this? How do I know that it's working? What can I see in my students that it's working? And I'm talking about this not only in the sense of, you know, assessment, formal assessment, when we have quizzes or tests, but I'm talking about in the classroom, almost simultaneously as we are teaching, they are learning and we are looking for that impact, okay? And so having impact means, you know, always as part of our lessons, asking these 2 questions, okay? How do we know that students are learning? So let's look at these 2 images that I've put here, okay? How do we know that this little girl, and I'm easier to do this when we're in brick and mortar, obviously, but now that we've gone online, okay, how do we do this online? How do we know our students are learning? And so can I just say, one of the greatest difficulties I have in my online lessons is students not wanting to turn on their camera or feeling comfortable that being in class, it's okay not to turn on their camera. So many of my students during lockdown in Turkey, We're used to not having their camera on and their microphones on during class, okay? Now, that is great for when we want to control the class. If we've got 24, 30 students online in front of us, and there might be background noise and 2 or 3 want to speak at the same time. And I understand the need of a teacher to ask students, can you turn off your mic, or getting a lot of noise? Or it's not necessary to have your camera on, or my camera's not working very well. But notice what we're saying to our students when we do that. We are already limiting how much we expect them to participate. We are already limiting, saying that you don't need to participate a lot, and you'll probably have in the next 40 minutes, 1 hour, you might participate 2-3 minutes. And if you do, then you can turn on your camera. And it means you're participating only to me, okay? Only to me as a teacher. I don't expect you to participate with the other people in this class. So right off online, when we tell our students that, we're limiting the impact we will have on their learning. We're making them passive students, maybe even passive learners, if they're going to learn anything in that sense. So it's important, first of all, that we see this little girl online. We can see her body language. If we go to the importance of oracy skills and the importance of communication, okay, body language, eye contact are part of communication. So we need to do that online also. So as we look at this little girl online learning, you can see she's got a microphone, she's got her headphones with the microphone, and you can see she's got her finger up, an indication that she wants to participate. She's telling the teacher, can I have a go? She is smiling, which is important, but in that first picture, she is reacting to something, okay? And as teachers, we begin to look and to see how our students are learning. Now, I don't want to give the impression that this is easy. It's always easy to come to a session and say, oh, if you do this, this, and this, it automatically works. Learning is an experience, and it's an interaction. And it doesn't happen just because the teacher does what they're supposed to do. The student also needs to be there with the right mindset. So in this case, if I look at that, this little girl's desk, I can see that she's got papers out, she's involved. So there, I can see the expression in her eyes. She's obviously been surprised by something. Okay, and all of that is indications for me as a teacher that I'm having some kind of impact on her learning. She is involved, she is engaged. So the question is then, what can teachers do for students to learn better? It's that question that comes back is, what can I do, not only in the way I plan my lessons, not only in the way that I choose my activities, but also in the way I react to the students at the time of the lesson. When I notice that there's some confusion in their faces, do I pause? When I ask a question, do I wait for an answer, or is it a question that I already know the answer to and they know that also? All of that will be clues, okay? So when we are talking about impact, we are, of course, talking that students are engaged, that students are involved. Now, you know, in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe more, I've heard of the importance of engaging our students. And I completely agree with that. But what does that mean? So impact, okay, leads us to notice, what does it mean that our students are engaged? So if you look at that third picture that I've just included here, you can see that something happened in that lesson that this little girl reacted to. She is laughing. Something was funny, something she didn't expect, okay? So we're looking for signs, maybe even physical signs of engagement, both in our brick and mortar lessons, as well as in our online lessons. We want students to respond. So what I mean by that is, we don't want students to simply answer a question, and that's it. So in my classes, I remember I had a class, a high school student, and I asked the student, so how was your day? And this student was very much back, muted, the camera on, moved forward, unmuted, said, fine, okay, and muted again, and then sat back again. And I said, what did you do? And the student again moved forward, unmuted, said nothing, and muted again, and went back. Now, that is already an indication, body language, and how the student is muting, that student is just answering my questions. So if I say, what did you do? Nothing, they're answering my questions. We're not really having a conversation. We are in a lesson. And the impact so far is minimal. So I want, I'm going to encourage that student maybe not to mute, to move a little bit forward. I want to increase the possibility of my having more of an impact than the expectation of the student of sitting back and waiting for me to teach. I want students to take notice that there's a point that she has her finger up. I want my students, for my lessons to have more impact, I want to encourage them not only to raise their hand, raise their finger to ask a question, but sometimes in older students to be able to interrupt each other. When we meet our friends in a cafe, okay, we don't raise our hands to speak. And that is because we have learned, okay, how to take turns, how to look for signals of when to listen to someone, okay, when to wait for them to finish something, when to indicate maybe with our eyes, with our shoulders, that we are about to say something, and we learn how to take turns. And we learn this all of our lives, okay? So we want that in our classes too. We want to encourage students to take that initiative and to communicate. So, and I don't mean just to answer my questions. So again, when I ask my students, what did you do on the weekend? And a student tells me, oh, teacher, I played football. I say, great. Where did you play football? And he looks at me and he says, in the park. Okay. And I think, okay, now notice, I'm already noticing that I'm not having that impact because the student is going, and I already know that he's making it up. And I said, well, did you win or did you lose? And the more questions I ask, eventually the student says, oh, teacher, it's just a sentence. It's not real. Okay. Now, that student is not trying to get away with something. What that student is basically doing is responding to my question, giving me an activity in the past simple because he thinks that's what I want. That student is not communicating because I played football is not true. He's not communicating what he did. So we want, in looking for impact, we want our students in our English lessons to communicate. So we want real information. So what did you really do? Can I say that in a class I had once, it was 14 students, about 6th grade, I think. So they were about 11, 12 years old. And I asked the students, what did you do on the weekend? And all 14 students told me, I do my homework. So they all made the same little mistake in the verb, not important. I understood the communication, but with all 14 telling me exactly the same thing, and I asked, well, what else did you do? And they didn't know what I meant. It took about 2-3 weeks for them to understand that it was a real question for me, and that what did they do? And I started getting things like I visit my grandmother, I play video games, and then as they communicated more, okay, we were able to then improve that language and have more impact. So I want, as you can see the pictures here also, I want the students to enjoy the experience. And notice here that I didn't put enjoy the lesson, enjoy the class. I put enjoy the experience. Learning is an experience. It is an interaction. So if we enjoy that experience, if we're talking about things that we like, playing with things that we like, we're going to remember what we learned. And if you look at this girl's eyes, her expressions, see, she is enjoying this. Now, as the education manager for the school where I work in now, I always like to say that imagine that your students are going to school the next day and you want them to talk about your lesson. You want them to talk about the experience they had. And that is a good sign of impact. Okay, so as we take these forward, I'm talking about how do we do this? What do I mean by this? This is an activity from one of our lessons. You can see that it's an activity about free time. Okay, and what do we do in our free time? We can do a lot of different activities here. But one of the activities that I encourage our students to do is the idea of using the PowerPoint. And it's an activity of what I mean by an activity or a lesson having impact. We want students to talk about their free time. But can I say it's easy to do a session about what we want and everything seems to go perfectly, but it's another thing when we are with our students and what do they, how do they react and what are their expectations. So here, learning with impact starts with a teacher, but we want that learning, okay, to be, that's our goal. So here, we're going to imagine that they know most, if not all of these activities, and we're going to ask them, okay, what do you do in your free time? What do you like to do in your free time? So any question that the teacher has that allows the students to communicate. So if a class is not communicating, not having great impact yet, they may just give you, I like fishing, okay? But we want to make sure that is communication. Assuming that we are at that point of getting communication, students may make small mistakes. Now, can I just say that in my 20 years or so of going to Turkey, observing lessons in Turkish schools and Turkish classrooms, okay? And then teaching, I teach adult students online, Turkish students. One of the greatest obstacles to learning is they avoid making mistakes. So the first thing that we need to convince our students is that part of learning is making mistakes. They made mistakes when they learned Turkish and when they were children and learned Turkish. So one of the things that I do with my classes usually is I usually ask them, what kind of mistakes did they make when they were small and learning Turkish? So obviously, if they are 12, 13, 14 years old, I ask them to ask their parents, what kind of words did they make up? What words were difficult for them? And every family has little stories of their children when they learn Turkish, the kind of things that they would make. I remember I had a cousin of mine who could not say my name. My name is Verissimo, so it is a long name, and she called me V. And because she called me V in my family for a long time, everyone called me V. And that was part of that experience of learning to pronounce. We all have that. So in our lessons, now this is a speaking activity, this is a speaking lesson. So I want my students to communicate. I don't want them to focus on the language, but I want to help them correct their mistakes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask them, what do you love doing in your free time? And Erdem loves camping, but he doesn't like fishing. Yusuf can't stand museums because they're boring. And Yusuf may say to me, teacher, I don't like museums, very boring. And I turn that into a sentence. And maybe I ask Yusuf, you really don't like it, or you don't like a little bit? And they say, no, teacher, I don't like. So I change the don't like to I can't stand. The teacher is able to impact the language the students will use by asking a few more questions and making these sentences. Excuse me. I can write the sentences as they are seeing me online. I can write the sentences on the board as they see me, or I can do these sentences as they are talking to me, and then I show them my PowerPoint slide. Now, in my PowerPoint slide here, I am going to go off the presentation mode, and let me find the slide quickly here. Here we go. Okay, and the reason I do this is because now with the students, okay, I am going to take my text box and I'm going to go like this. And then I'm going to say, Erdem, tell me about Yusuf. Yusuf, tell me about Emine. Emine, tell me about Doruk. Doruk, tell me about Elif. Elif, tell me about Erdem. And if it's easy, now they're paying attention more. And I might do this. I might just copy, paste. And again, here we go. I might do it again. Okay, everybody. So now, Erdem, tell me about Elif. Okay, Yusuf, tell me about Doruk. And I might change that. So what I'm doing here is, notice they're communicating because we are talking about the real information about them. If they are having problems with remembering the information, if they are having problems with the parts of the language, I can adapt the activity by using smaller boxes and putting here, or I might put it here. Whatever the communication that the student is having trouble with, I copy paste. Let me do that here. And I might do this because, you know, they're saying enjoy, like, hate, as opposed to enjoys, likes, hates, that S, that third person singular. But I don't mention that. I, as the teacher, can have more impact on their learning because my activity here is a bit more flexible. So again, you can do this on the board in a brick and mortar classroom, but again, the activity as we go forward into online learning, it is an activity that you can also use with your students online. Now, if I go back to my presentation here. So how does this activity, as an example, what does it mean in this activity? How does it improve impact? One, I am hoping to keep my students engaged. In weaker classes, students who, you know, when you say, what did you do on the weekend? What do you like to do in your free time? Those are very open activities. And as students get used to communicating in my lessons, they need more structure. The activity provides them with a little bit more structure so that they know what I want them to say. The challenge is saying it. They are also saying it without the little mistakes. I haven't said, you've made a mistake. Can you repeat that? What do you mean, love or loves? I haven't focused on the mistake. I've given them an opportunity to repeat the sentences with a little bit of challenge. They are responding. So the more they know, okay, that information, the more they understand that Yusuf can't stand museums, and they may laugh, they may roll their eyes, they may go, me too. And notice the body language that's telling me this is having some impact. And because they are communicating, okay, they may say, oh, teacher, me too. I can't stand museums. They have the opportunity. Oh, teacher, not me. I like fishing. Oh, it's so boring. They have the opportunity to engage with each other, to respond, not simply answer. Now, it could be that some of the students focus so much on the sentences that they're still at the point of just answering and not responding. That's fine. As a teacher, you're beginning to get that information, okay? And you know that's where the student needs to improve. So if students are at the point of answering as opposed to simply responding communicatively, that's fine. Let them create, let them gain confidence, let them see what you want from them, and let them adapt as learners to what you expect as a teacher. And the two together will create that impact. So remember to also, teaching and learning are two different things, okay? So when they come together, the impact is greater, okay? But it takes time. So give your students time, okay? Let them react and adapt to your expectations. In our classes online, in some of our classes, I hear from my teachers, and we get students who are only now 4 or 5 months into our program. We get students now beginning to interact more, beginning to have some fun, because it took those 3 or 4 months for them to see that this is what the teacher wanted, for them to feel comfortable, for them to notice that they weren't being overcorrected, etc. Okay, so it takes time for impact to happen. Okay, so for a learning to have impact, the learner must take responsibility for their learning. Okay, it is not as that student standing back, unmuting, answering my questions, and that was enough. There must be a little bit more responsibility, saying teaching is what the teacher does and learning is what the student does. And the two are separate, but for learning to have impact, they must come together. And that we want to encourage that responsibility, that activity, that participation, engagement, involvement, all these words, we want to encourage that in our lessons, okay? And we're going to look at body language to see if we're having that impact. And important, the learning must change the learner in some way. Now, when we're talking about the little girl that I showed you the image of, she is not necessarily aware of those changes, okay? And students, something about education, I've traveled all over the world, and something about education in every country I've traveled to makes students passive. Students wait at their desks in our traditional brick and mortar classes. Students wait in their desk for the teacher to come in and for the teacher to start the lesson. We've taught students that, okay? We've taught, I remember in my class, I asked my students, hey, what did you do on the weekend? A normal question that I usually ask my students, okay? And in this class, they didn't answer me right away. And I said, well, come on, guys, did you have a good weekend? What did you do on the weekend? That idea of leading their language to real communication before I started my lesson. Well, it was too soon for them. It was a big question. And I remember a student, Andrea, so he raised his hand and he said, teacher, you want the past simple, right? And I thought, no, Andrea, I just want you to tell me what you did on the weekend. But for those students, and my fault too, because part of my classes, they are always asking, what does the teacher want? And when our students are asking, what does the teacher want? When our students are only answering and not necessarily responding in full, okay, that diminishes that impact. It doesn't change them in any way, because Andrea might tell me something that I want to hear, like the students telling me I do my homework, and not something that they really want to tell me and then might be part of that experience. So that is an important situation there, okay? So now feedback is, we're talking about what can the teacher do, okay, to create and to get greater impact. John Hattie has done a lot of research on what works in the classroom. And we're talking about everything from adding more hours to simply giving immediate feedback, like, well done, fantastic, I like the way you did that, or can you do that again? What do you think about that? Any type of feedback. And John Hattie, his research shows that good quality feedback can have a positive impact on student learning. So whether that feedback is correction for writing or for homework, or that and what I'm talking here is that feedback as part of the learning experience in the classroom itself, okay? And so I suggest here that we share our objectives with our students, okay? We let them know what we want them to achieve. So because learning and teaching should not be a secret. So if we come into the class, we share our learning objectives, we tell our students what our intention is for that day, we make it understandable for them. We let them know that they can change that. This is my expectation as a teacher. Your expectations and your participation may change that, but we share with that with them so that that classroom, that lesson is both of us together. And again, let me share here another activity that I encourage. Again, we're talking about speaking, and another activity that I encourage students to do, I encourage teachers to do in the lessons, and that is that creating dialogues. So if we're talking about students, let's say our lesson is on the past simple, whatever it might be from a teacher point of view, but I want my students to get used to talking to each other. So I'm going to create a dialogue. I might start the dialogue with them if they're not used to doing dialogues. I might say, hey guys, it's Monday. I want you to have a little conversation about what you did on the weekend. Let's write a dialogue. So however you do it, I might do it for my class, starting the dialogue like this. Hey, how was your weekend? It was great. I mean, really great. Really? What did you do? And now notice that my conversation is trying to be conversational. We're trying to be as authentic as possible. We're focusing on the communication. I hope that right now my students are curious about what the dialogue was about. Okay, and then we're going to continue. I can continue with one line or two lines, or the 3 lines here, and they're going to continue on this. Notice here what's important is that in most course books, in most courses, dialogues are only between 2 students. Okay, so I would encourage dialogues between 3, maybe even 4 students. Okay, that is a little bit challenging for them. Who talks next? But imagine that they're coming to school, they're outside the classroom, and they're in a little group of 3 or 4, and they're creating that dialogue. And again, that dialogue is, you want that communication, as I mentioned before, you want that engagement, as I mentioned before. And as John Hattie mentions, feedback is important. And I just wanted to share with you here. In our lessons, we focus on speaking. They are speaking lessons. But we tell our students throughout the course what we are looking for. And we give them feedback. Now, can I just say, it is very easy for teachers, for parents, for schools to see this as assessment, to see this as a judgment of the student. So it is part of my job to convince everybody in my school that this is not assessment. I mean this as feedback. We learn better when we have feedback. We raise that impact. We make the impact of learning greater when students are also involved and they know what we want. And in this case, you can see that we want participation. So A and B for us is we want to increase that participation in students. In our classes, as student participation increases, as student engagement increases, we may have some difficulties in language, they may be making mistakes, that's okay. We then move that on to speaking skills. The more they participate, the more they are speaking, the more I have language that I can use an example in the two activities that I mentioned today. And as they're speaking more and as their speaking skills are increasing, their pronunciation is increasing, their grammar, their expressions are increasing, we're going to encourage them to really communicate. Not only use grammar, not only use language because it's correct, but use it to say something, to mean something. And we want our students to ask questions because it's important to be able to say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. I'm sorry, I don't know, that kind of thing. So we share this with our students also. And I encourage you to share with your students what it is that you want them to do. Again, with our teachers, we ask, teachers should think, where is each learner now? So when I talked about assessment for learning, the teacher in class is thinking, what kind of mistakes are they making? What kind of concentration are they giving me? What kind of participation, okay, are they doing right now? And what do they need from me? How can I help? So would a pat on the back help? Would saying well done help? Would calling on a student help? It doesn't have to be a great activity, but it is a running part of the classroom that the teacher is going through those three questions to increase that impact during that lesson, and always coming back and asking that question again and again and again as we increase the impact on that learning experience, okay? So having said that and making the class, so notice that the class is very dynamic. The lesson is very dynamic. We're encouraging students to participate more and we're responding to their needs, I would say almost immediately, excuse me. So as we're doing that, as I started with this, inspiring curiosity, getting more involvement from this, I would finish my lessons with the idea of what I'm about to do here in this session. Going back to how you started, hey guys, this session was about this. This lesson was about this. What do you think? How do you feel right now? I really like the question at the end of the class of how do you feel? How do you feel about the class? How we feel about our learning and knowing that creates greater impact for that learning. I'm aware of things I didn't like. I'm aware of things that I did like. I'm aware of what makes me nervous. I'm aware that I might be scared to say something. I'm aware that I said something and it worked and the teacher said, well done. The more I'm aware of the feelings that I have in learning something new, the more I can expand, okay? And I hope involve the students and involve myself as a learner in the classroom. So I would come back to that inspiring curiosity and think, what questions did you have? Okay, what questions did I answer? Okay, what questions do you still have? And I am encouraging you to contact me with that. But what it says also, as I finish my presentation here, what it says also is that our lessons to create impact are an experience of teaching and learning, and they are cyclical. So when we get to the end of our lesson, that is actually the beginning of our next lesson. And when we run our next lesson and we run to the end, that is the beginning of our next lesson. So as I finish my presentation here, I'm coming back to the beginning and I'm encouraging you to also do the same in lessons. And that is that connect your lessons to the one before. It could be something like, hey guys, after the last lesson, okay, does anybody have any questions? Did you think of anything that we didn't do? Okay, hey, remember the 5 words we did last week? Did anybody remember any of those words? Yeah, okay, oh, that's really good. So which word? Oh, nobody remembered that. Well, that's interesting. That's what we need to learn. And what we're doing is we're reminding them, what did we do? And we're connecting that and bringing it to our lesson today, and our lessons become a series of connections of experiences. In my opinion, learning is an experience. And for me, that is what it means to learn with impact. I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. Like I said, I would prefer to be in Turkey, but thank you for joining me online. Please feel free to contact me. You have my email address. If you have any questions, any comments, I'd love to hear from you. I love being a teacher. I love working in education, and I love talking to teachers. So everyone, thank you very much for being here. Have a great conference. I want to thank the conference organizers for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share this with you. Have a great conference and a great weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Verissimo, for this informative session. Really, we have learned a lot. Thanks again. Bye bye. Değerli katılımcılarımız, sizlere 2 tane önemli duyurumuz olacak. Birincisi, yüz yüze geçirdiğimiz zirvelerin ruhunu evlerimizden hissedebilmek için ve ETZ hediyelerinden kazanmak için sanal fuaye alanımızı, standlarımızı aralarda ziyaret etmenizi ve canlı görüşmeler yapmanızı önemli tavsiye ediyoruz. Diğer bir duyurumuz da sosyal medya ile ilgili. Bize değerli katılımcılarımız çektiğiniz fotoğraflarınızı ve yeni edindiğimiz bilgileri sosyal medyada paylaşmayı ve @tek Summit hesabını etiketleyerek ETZ22 hashtagini kullanmayı unutmayalım efendim. Bir sonraki oturumumuz 13.15'te başlayacak ve Yıldıray Kararslan bizimle beraber olacak. Öğrenmede ve öğretmede orası etkisini tartışacağız. Bir sonraki oturumda görüşmek üzere.